having built up the dashboard pretty much a little while ago, of course I now need to take it all out again so that I can do wiring. So I managed to get my touch screen in here. It's just a cheapo Android head unit, but I'll stand the whole thing on its side because, as you should see, there's not much depth to the head unit, and in fact if you look at it lengthways, everything along the back of the dash sticks out roughly the same distance, which is handy, but it all does need to be wired. So this is my completed dash blank. Not sure whether I will use this actual one or treat it as a prototype, because you might have noticed one or two areas where the switches aren't quite in line. I don't know, it's a question of whether that matters or not. But I have some air vents which have just been put in. There are couple of extra switches and warning lamps, and that's it really. So it's missing the other knee roll because that's a bit of a palaver to put in round the steering column, and of course the dash top hangs over the top. So but this is basically it, and yeah, even engine start. So it's got everything I want. So this is the back of the dashboard, and as I've mentioned before, I want the whole thing to be connected to the rest of the car via a multi-plug rather than individual wires. And to do that I'm going to use this. Now this is an ATX power connector extension cable for use on a PC. It's useful because it's got a male plug on one end and a female socket on the other end, so you can actually plug it into itself. So what it actually represents is a 24-way pre-wired plug. Now I'm not sure that 24 is going to be enough, but it might be. But anyway, 24 is certainly enough to get me started. What I don't want is a whole bunch of wiring. If you took the dashboard out, that you then got to do loads and loads of individual connectors. That's what I'm trying to avoid, because it's a real fiddle. I've been there, done that, and I don't want to do it again. I may have mentioned that wiring in the dashboard area is probably the most complicated section in the car. There's so many individual connections. All the switches, all the dials, all the warning lamps, stereo, it goes on and on. And this is what it looks like after quite a period of time. I'm using this ATX connector, I think I mentioned before, because it's 24 ways and you can get them pre-wired, so that I'll be able to, in the future, just disconnect the whole dashboard from the rest of the car without taking the wiring harness with it. And it's nearly done, but in spite of the fact there's 24 wires on this, it's not enough. You would be surprised how many the connections there actually are. And this is my diagram. The top shows all 24 connections, what they're being used for, and so on. And yeah, it's not enough, because as well as all that, there's 8 speaker wires because of front and back speakers, and there's 4 wires for the electric handbrake, and a couple of others as well. So I'm going to have to use a second ATX connector, and these are the, well, originally it was like this, and when I cut it in half, so this is what you buy, is an ATX extension cable. Cut it in half and you end up with a mating pair of plugs like that. But what I obviously don't want to do is be able to plug the wrong plug into the wrong socket. So I wouldn't want to plug that one into there when it's supposed to be this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse the sex of the connection for the second plug. So where that is female, I guess, this one will be male, and I would be able to plug it into itself, but that would be fine because there's no power on it or anything like that. So yeah, I've still got to do all them and the handbrake wires, and I also need to make sure that this section here is as tidy as possible, and I think you'll agree it probably isn't, and the problem is excess length. So when you're terminate, as I did, I started at the switches or the lamps, and I ran a wire, connected it to the plug, and it just like ended up how it ended up. So the length wasn't in any way judged accurately. So now I can see that, in fact, yeah, quite a bit too long. I'm going to have to re-terminate these spade terminals, which are 2.8mm spade terminals. They're just the right size for going on these switches and lamps from Car Builder Solutions. I think they're sometimes called motorcycle spade terminals. So I'm going to need to redo those. Luckily I've got lots of them. So yeah, that's set about a little bit additional tidying. After quite a bit more work, I now have this. Now, I did say this is the very most complicated section of wiring in the car. This is immediately behind the dashboard. So I have, I think I wired up yesterday 42 different individual connections coming into these two plugs. And yeah, but if you can imagine what it would be like, we needed to take these out. 42 different wires would have to be disconnected from each of the units. That would be a nightmare. So instead of that we have two big plugs, and that's the whole point of this. And what I need to do now, of course, is wire up to the other side where it goes into the main harness of the car that obviously stays there even if you take the dashboard out. But we have everything. We have all the switches, all the gauges, even the radio, everything. So yeah, it took me quite a while to get here, and it involved lots of heat shrink sleeving, soldering, it's a reel of solder, to get all the various wires joined together in the right places, lots of these miniature spade terminals, and proprietary plug connections that went with the radio, for example. That's a very thin radio which fits behind the air conditioning unit. So here we are, that's kind of it. So I now need to do the opposite side of these two plugs on the main harness. So that's what I shall do next. After a considerable amount of work, we now have this as being the main wiring harness that goes behind the dash. As you can see, it bears very little resemblance to the original Gilman harness. Well, there we are. It's hardly similar at all. Some of the wires, most of the wires have been reused. So we have two of these ATX plugs going to the dash panel itself, and we've got this one that goes off to the back of the car. Over here we have some original switches, but these are going to be replaced with relays, which we saw on the previous. Those will be replaced with relays as we saw in the previous work that I did related to using the Corsa column stalks. So this is going to disappear, that's going to disappear. This is the headlamp switch. It may or may not finish up being this, but my idea is that all of these will be relays and the switching will be done on the front panel. But I now need to test it, and there's lots of unfinished ends where I don't know if the wires, I don't know how long they should be. So I need to, the first thing is to see, oh, over here I should say, all this lot is potentially going to, well, it is intended to go into a fuse box, which will be something somewhere around about here. Now this is where we get into details about how long the wires should be. Yeah, so this is the width of the car. It actually says on that piece of tape, you probably can't see side, that's the side of the dash. Over here there's another one. I'm tripping over you again. Another one, and this stretch here goes off towards the wiper motor and the battery. This one over here goes into the door. It's got things like a speaker wire and wires for the central locking. And over here we've got the fuse box, like I mentioned. Now this lot goes off to the front of the car, and somewhere here, I need to separate that out actually, we've got the equivalent parts for the door. Yeah, I need to, so I'll put all those together, so that's another example of getting things laid out. So we'll have multiple branches. This needs to be three branches on this side, so I'll sort that out. Some of these are going to the door, and some of these are going to the fuse box, which will be near the door. And this lot goes off down the front of the car. Okay, I've separated out the door loom, which I've got temporarily mixed up. So this is the fuse box branch, this is the door branch, this is the front of car branch. It contains all the lighting. We've got two connectors for the dash. We've got another one that goes down the back of the car. Over here we've got a bunch of earths that's got far too many in it, but I'm not cutting it off yet because I might discover I need some. More than I've actually got. In there we have another door loom for the passenger side, and going off down the front there is for the wiper motor and the battery. And the battery wire, I've got a feeling is too short, but you've got to work with what you've got. So okay, right, now to do some testing. And here we have the dash panel kind of ready to begin in testing, and it has indeed passed the very first stage, which is, does it plug in? And as you can see, all this mess of wires, and these are the two plugs which enable the dash to be plugged into the rest of the car, and the third plug, which is down here, goes down to the back of the car. I can't test that here because that plug, the other half of it, is actually in the car. This will do. There's plenty of complexity in here, as I think you'll agree, and it looks like there's quite a bit of slack as well, which is something I've tried to reduce as much as possible, but yeah, looks like it's about a foot too long, doesn't it? The main harness, I think, will be hoisted up approximately to this level at the top of the bulkhead, which will be about this far, less than a foot, maybe 9-10 inches from the back of the dashboard. So I won't hoist it up now because it's going to be too disruptive to the layout, but so somehow I'm going to have to lose the slack in these connections. The rest of it, all hanging loose, is mainly hanging like that because I don't know exactly where it needs to go. So some of it will end up with a plug on the end of it, some of it will be directly wired, some of it, as I've mentioned, will have a fuse box, which will probably sit round about here, but I don't know exactly. So anyway, one thing at a time. I have to test that the different parts of the dash are in fact connected as I hope they are, and temporary use of a broomstick handle to stop the whole thing from falling over.